Initiated in 1986, Exim Bank of India's flagship event, Commencement Day Annual Lecture Series, marked to commemorate the beginning of the bank's operations in 1982, does more than present a looking glass to view contemporary developments in the Indian and global economy. Each year, an eminent speaker, an opinion maker is invited by the bank to inform, promote, and also provide an insight on the impact of globalization among the sharpest minds of the world. The first CDAL, held in 1986, delved on the issue of international trade in services, implications for developing countries. Dr. Nair had stated in his lecture that international trade in services should constitute an integral part of multilateral trade negotiations for progressive dismantling of barriers. Dr. Das Gupta had said that a great deal of lost human welfare could have been avoided were environmental planning an integral part of our national planning apparatus. Shri Abid Hussain emphasized that export growth in the coming years will depend on the pace of technological development.
Shri M. Narasimham stated in 1989 that there needs to be a dose of liberalization of our financial sector. Mr. Dell made a strong case for reshaping the World Bank to attain better results by a mix of policy actions. Professor Bardhan highlighted that people's belief in bureaucratic incapacity and the lack of motivation were behind the movement towards dismantling of state structures and privatization. In 1992, Dr. Ahluwalia indicated that domestic deregulation and hesitant trade liberalization lead to better productivity in the industrial sector.
Lord Meghnad Desai touched upon the issue whether India can achieve the socialist ideal and solve the matters concerning it. Dr. Vijay Joshi highlighted that a durable revival of private investment depends on several conditions that govern the reform process. In the 10th CDAL, Dr. Fisher in his speech stated that only the market-oriented approach will lead to development and growth. Mr. Gupta emphasized that increasing productivity is the cornerstone of economic development.
Dr. Aspe elaborated on the subject by saying that the policy of rescuing inefficient firms introduces a negative incentive to private firms. Mr. Dallara stated that technology, communication, free trade and capital mobility bring substantial benefits. Mr. Brexton was of the opinion that fresh negotiations are needed to enable the global system handle the problems plaguing international trade relations.
Dr. Esuke spoke in the context of partial capital controls, which he said, if recognized, could mobilize the flow of goods, services and direct investments. Professor Stern remarked in 2001 that improving the investment climate is about actions aimed at poverty reduction. In his speech delivered in 2002, Dr. Anderson spoke on issues pertaining to food availability, hunger, and initiatives like the White Revolution. Mr. Bolger stated that the current international trade policies affected the condition of the farmers in the world.
Dr. Aninak was of the view that many countries realized that tertiary industries are at the center stage of opportunities. Mr. Recupero, in his speech, gave a solution to reduce excessive volatility in exchange rate among various currencies to stabilize financial flows. Sir Suma Chakrabarti emphasized that India has made great strides in terms of deregulation since the end of Licence Raj.
Dr. David Hume, during the lecture quoted, "To assist people trapped in poverty, we need a livelihood security first approach." Mr. Davis emphasized that in terms of purchasing power parity, the emerging South has become the contributor to the world growth. Mr. Lin said that the countries with large forex reserves, investing in projects in developing countries with high returns, could help restore stability in global trade.
Mr. Panich Bakri in 2010 said that in a globalized world, shocks emanating from the financial sector of one country can be transmitted rapidly to the interconnected systems. During his lecture, Professor Yu said that it was time for China to consider allowing the yuan to float freely. Professor Jagdish Bhagwati stated that preferential trade agreements was the only real alternative available. In 2013, Professor Pranab Bardhan asserted, "For quality producers, globalization certainly helps."
Professor Mahbubani advised that for India to take full advantage of the great convergence, it needs to leverage certain assets it possesses. During the 30th CDAL in 2015, Dr. John Lipsky expressed that there is more to financial sector reform than just regulations, of course. According to Dr. Kaberuka, policy consistency and policy predictability has a huge premium. Professor Barry Eichengreen cautioned that foreign reserves may provide less protection against outflows than what meets the eye.
Professor Geeta Gopinath spoke about how the large amount of trade invoicing in dollars generates a higher demand for the dollar, thereby encouraging its further borrowing. Professor Banerjee emphasized that India needs to start from a different set of premises and create a framework for social policy which is more responsive.
Professor Helen Ray explained how the dominance of the dollar in international trade, international banking, and asset markets matters for international transmission of shocks and macroeconomic policies.
As a knowledge-driven institution serving to build brand India globally, Exim Bank of India's Commencement Day Annual Lecture has greatly contributed to relevant public discourses in the domain of international trade for over 3 decades.